So Nadia is here, and I'm really excited to have you in the studio here for the first time. And, you can't really talk about your run for Congress until you really tell a little bit of the backstory. And it is an extensive story, and many of us know it, uh, backwards and frontwards. But you got to tell, the story because there is a passion here. Uh, to your run for Congress. So how did this all begin for you?
So I was an apolitical person. I homeschooled my children in Sheffield, Massachusetts. We run a farm there. We produce uh, feed for a dairy farm, the largest dairy farm in Massachusetts, which is in Ashley Falls. It's called Pine Island Farm. And I had no desire to be a political person, but March 10th, early in the morning on March 10th of 2019, I was cleaning up in the middle of the night and I turned on the radio and the BBC was on there, and the BBC described something that, in conjunction with a text that I had just gotten from my daughter, just made me just start shaking. So my daughter was traveling for a nonprofit called Think Well, and she was doing accountability work for the expenditures of the Gates Foundation. So the Gates Foundation was helping people with their healthcare in Uganda. But the question is, was that money really helping human beings? And so my daughter was a data geek who believes that everybody should have healthcare, and she was working to figure out per capita how was this money impacting the population in Uganda. And so she was flying from Washington, D.C. The flight stopped in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. She changed planes and she texted us to say that she only had 2 more hours to Nairobi. And I was relieved because it's safer in my mind to be on an airplane than it is to be in Nairobi traffic. And then I went downstairs and I turned on the radio, and the BBC told us that that plane had just crashed, that my daughter had just boarded. So 6 minutes and 40 seconds after takeoff, it was down. And we didn't know if there were any survivors. We just got our family in the car. We drove to JFK Airport in Qatar, which was a 12-hour flight. We learned that there were no survivors. And then we went to Ethiopia to try to collect her remains and bring them home. But we couldn't do that either because the plane had dove into the earth. So there was only a few parts of the plane sticking out of the earth. So even after being in Ethiopia for a week, we could not bring her remains home for her funeral. So we ended up having an unusual funeral with no remains. And then we were just devastated. Like, I didn't want to, I'm Ralph Nader's niece. And so Ralph Nader had predicted this crash, that he knew this plane was dangerous. It had already crashed in Ethiopia. And he was in the news talking about how his grandniece, Samya, my daughter, who had just had dinner with him on the Friday night and then got on the plane on Saturday morning. And then that same, then that plane in Ethiopia had crashed. So he was the last person that had contact with her. He also knew about the dangers of the plane, so the press was talking to him, and I didn't have any desire to talk to them at all. But he told me in April, so her funeral was March 23rd, and in April he told me, you need to stand up as a victim's family because they're going to put this plane back into service. And I said, no, they would never do that. Boeing would never do that. That would be risking a third crash. The FAA would never allow that. I said, I don't need to stand up. I don't need to expose myself to the public, to the press. This is not a necessary thing. I'm not going to do it. And then he showed me that the FAA had changed the comment period to put the plane back in service from 30 days to 15 days. And when he showed me that, I knew that he was right and I was wrong, that they were going to put the plane back into service without fixing it. And so we did go to Washington, and I kind of did it like blindly. I just went because I would want someone to stand up for me. I would wish that after the first crash, somebody could have done that for me. I knew that we were doing everything possible to try to prevent a third crash, but I didn't believe that we could prevail because Boeing is such a big company, and the FAA was against us, and the Department of Transportation was against us. And, all these members of Congress didn't seem to be listening to us. So we kind of walked from office to office to office. And the end result was that we did get the Aviation Safety Act passed in December of 2020. So it took a while, right? It took a year and a half, more than a year and a half. But surprise to me, it was a big surprise to me that we were able to help do that, along with many, many other people who worked on the legislation. And so it gave me heart, and I decided to go to Illinois because I could see that the FAA wasn't really able to get Boeing to correct their behavior. And I thought, well, maybe if Boeing had a financial incentive to produce, have better manufacturing, that they would correct themselves. So I thought, well, they have insurance for all of the deaths. They have insurance to cover the people that died. But what if they couldn't insure that? If they had punitive damages for wrongful death in Illinois, they wouldn't be able to cover it. So I went to Illinois. My husband, my lawyer said, you can't possibly pass a bill for punitive damages for wrongful death in Illinois. Illinois is a place where people have their relationships, they wheel and deal. You're from Massachusetts. There's no way you can do this. And the short story is that we did it. I didn't do it by myself.
And that really is shortening the story, because the amount of passion and the absolute just tenacity that you had to show in order to pass that in Illinois. If anyone is a congressperson and has that kind of tenacity, that's the kind of congressperson that I want, to be honest with you. So you didn't go too deep into that story, but what you went through from the Motel Sixes to literally approaching every lawmaker and every lobbying group and everyone there, and just not stopping. That is, it's epic.
Yeah. And at the same time, there's moments of terrible discouragement.
Mm.
So, my son came out to visit me. He was worried about me. It's a daunting thing. And you get told, go back to Massachusetts, what are you doing here? And things like that. And you don't know when you're in the middle of doing this that you are going to succeed. But what I learned is that you don't need to know. You just do what you feel is right, and you put everything into it. And whatever the result is, I believe in God. So whatever the result is going to be for the good. Somehow it's going to be for the good. So now I'm heartened by these two successes, and I am ready to just keep on working. And in our district, in our congressional district, what I see is that we don't have enough doctors. So you're mandated to pay for health insurance here, but you don't actually get health care because you can't get an appointment. So you can't get an appointment like 4 months, 6 months, a year. I heard a man couldn't get an appointment with his primary care for 18 months. So during that time, whatever your issues are unattended to. So in that sense, you're paying for health insurance and you don't have health care. And that can be solved. The Ways and Means Committee, Richard Neal is the ranking member of the Ways and Means Committee in Congress, and healthcare is under his jurisdiction. So there's a bipartisan bill to solve this problem and get more doctors into our country, which would be specifically also into our district where we have a shortage. And he's not sponsoring the legislation. 175 congresspeople are sponsoring the legislation, but not our congressmen. And this is the story in numerous pieces of legislation which have to do with Social Security. Like, he gets out there in the press and says, I support Social Security. It helped me when I was a kid and I lost my parents. But actually, he sabotages efforts to strengthen Social Security and bring it up to the standard of living for today. He actively sabotages those efforts. So he says one thing to the district, but he actually does something different in Washington. And I really don't understand why.
And I think that's one of those things that when you look at Nadia, is initially it's air safety, and people are thinking, oh, okay, she's a big advocate for that. And it's true. You've been to Washington and you've advocated and you've been to Illinois and you've done all that. But to be very clear, you're not a one issue candidate. And so, for full disclosure, I've been, working overtime with Nadia, and we become very good friends. And I know a lot about your policies. And I think it's important to recognize that there are a lot of issues that people here in the Berkshires, people in Western Mass, are very concerned about, and they're not being addressed. And so Social Security is definitely one of those for sure. And actually, it's relevant to people who are retired and actually even public employees as well, because that issue is something that we're hoping is addressed, but he's not really addressing that.
So municipal employees, that includes teachers, firefighters, police officers, among others, they get a pension, but they are not allowed to take the Social Security that they've already paid into in other jobs. And it's called WEP, W-E-P. But Richard Neal has said that he's going to solve this problem. He's going to allow those people to collect their Social Security that they paid into. So he has a bill, and he has 0 co-sponsors of his bill. So there is another bill, it's HR 82, and there's 325 members of the House of Representatives, bipartisan from both parties, who have made a petition to go around Richard Neal and the Ways and Means Committee and bring this bill directly to the floor of the House. Now there's 375 co-sponsors last I looked, and not Richard Neal. So what is the difference between Richard Neal's bill and this bill? There's no survivor benefits in Richard Neal's bill. So he could say, well, I have no survivor benefits because I want to save money and I don't want this bill to cost too much money. But look at the tremendous support to pay for it among the members of the House of Representatives, way over half. So why are they supporting that? Because it costs a lot of money to leave a family destitute. That costs right. Society money, because those kids are then left on their own. They can get into trouble. They can have health problems. They can go to jail. And all of those things cost our society much more money than simply paying them survivor benefits.
All while costs are much greater rising. We know, when it comes down to it, Social Security benefits, looking at the face of an economy right now where everything is just skyrocketing. And Cara, we see this every day.
Every day. Yeah. Grocery store. I mean, it's crazy for a family of 7.
For a family of 7, for a family of 3, for a family of 4, and I think that's one of those things. I mean, some people in the political world just say, well, Congress people and politicians, they can't control that. I don't think that's true.
No, because there's greed involved. So not all of the high prices are due to greed. Some of those costs are real, but some of them are simply people taking advantage of the supply chain issues where they were forced to raise prices. But then when we solved the supply chain issues, the prices didn't come back down. So why should our butter be, go from $3 to $9? Right. And then people look for the sales and they look for butter that they can afford, and they cannot possibly buy the butter at full price. Well, we have to prevent companies from simply taking advantage and making prices too high from greed. If they want to have, they need to have high prices for a legitimate reason, that's a different story. But, we're not trying to climb all over retailers. This is not coming from retailers. This is coming from the middlemen who are taking advantage and trying to push prices up. And it's the retailer that might get the grief from it, because that's where people experience the high price while they're in the grocery store. But that's not who's actually taking the money and being greedy in terms of the consumer.
But at the end of the day, if corporate profits, including those profits that come from groceries, are increasing and continuing to explode, then clearly there's an issue, and it's a fairness issue. And whether it's not enough, competition in the market, or not enough control, or whatever it may be, I mean, listen, they want to control costs of Social Security, but at the end of the day, we're getting hit, and whether it's taxes or whether it's the cost of grocery store bills or housing,
Housing.
it all has a huge impact, and people are, it's a tough time right now.
Yeah, yeah, it is really tough. So I think the thing that I bring to the table is compassion and energy. So I see when people are hurting, I definitely empathize with families that have lost their kids to fentanyl overdoses or other kinds of opioid overdoses. This is a huge epidemic in our district and in our county, in Berkshire County. In the last 2 years, there's been over 465 deaths from opioid overdoses right in our county. That's a huge number of human beings. And if they were laid out on the street, I hope that we would rise up and do something about it. And shame is a terrible thing because people are embarrassed that this has happened. But how do you think fentanyl comes into our homes? It comes in packages through UPS and Federal Express. So people talk about the border, but it's actually being mailed in. And we have a loophole in our country. We don't inspect packages valued under $800. And so this means that we don't have dogs sniffing these packages or any mechanical means of telling that there's fentanyl in there. And we can. It's entirely possible for us to do that. And again, it's bipartisan legislation. It's out there. Richard Neal is finally supporting this legislation, but he could have initiated it a long time ago, and it is under his jurisdiction. And Richard Neal.
By the way,
Yeah.
the time to actually get a incumbent congressperson to move on some issues actually is during the election. So it is not a surprise to see Richard Neal moving on some of these issues right now as he positions himself with an actual challenger. And that's why you have to have contested elections. It'd be nice to have term limits too. We can talk about that as well. And real quickly, again, anyone who comments or gives us a like on the video or who shares the video is in the running for some Park Lane jewelry. And Jacqueline Rivera says, hey, and Bevan Alstein-Kroll says, can't wait to hear Nadia. So she's hearing you. Susan Korn-Koldis says, glad you have Nadia Milleron on tonight. Jackie Rivera and Susan Korn-Koldis both giving you love as you were talking about your story with the Boeing and Samya. And Jacqueline Rivera says, time for change. Neal has been in office since I was 7. I'm now 42. We need change. And Susan Korn-Koldis says, my vote is with you. So just a few comments coming in. But I want to talk about, you're an independent running for Congress, and Richard Neal, of course, is an establishment Democrat. He's been for a very long time, and those who support him would say, well, he's very powerful, and so why in the world would we change because he brings so much back to the district, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to address that because I think there's a couple of really great points that you have in this, being an independent and being an actual voice on Capitol Hill that can actually advocate for issues that right now sometimes are not being talked about either on the right or the left.
So anybody who is a representative in Congress can advocate money come to their district. It isn't just the purview of Richard Neal, or you don't have to be in a powerful position. You can just look at the needs of your district and go after the money and get your staff to help the district get the money. But Richard Neal kind of draws the line there. That's what he thinks is the total obligation of his office. But each office has, 770,000 constituents, and each office gets about 30,000 requests for help. And he's non-responsive. So we've been in over 300 offices on Capitol Hill, and they vary in their responsiveness and in their organization. Our representative's office is the absolute worst office that I have encountered. He just sends back a 2-line email for every request. Thank you for your inquiry. I'm proud to be your representative. That's it.
So to be clear, you have been a customer.
Right.
On Capitol Hill, a constituent, again, someone who's looking for, and again, this isn't just our office, our congressional district office. This is offices all across the country that now you've had experience with. And so you see the difference.
Right, right. So I want to be responsive. So I think that I see that this is the job. You get 30,000 requests. So you have to be ready to handle those requests, and you can direct people to get help. And, that's kind of, if you're in, like I was looking for a room, where's there a room that these family members who are going to be at this hearing and also Boeing can meet in? The family members are not going to go into the Boeing building. Boeing isn't offering to meet in their building, and the family members would experience trauma walking through those doors. They don't want to go into a Boeing building, and they have to meet and they have to negotiate. And where can we meet? So I contact my representative's office, Richard Neal's office, and they're like, oh, well, we're in the middle of writing a speech for our boss. And so we can't attend to this right now. Well, this is an international story with, tons of press and a lot of pressure, and, hearings are happening now. And I mean, I got help. I got help from all kinds of other representatives, Senator Warren's office, Senator Markey's office, Senator Blumenthal's office. I got help from Jim McGovern, from Stephen Lynch. Those are representatives from Massachusetts. So it is possible to give the help. I received the help. I just didn't get it from my own representative. So I want to clean up the office and have it be really responsive to people. Also, Congress is it's close between the Republicans and the Democrats, almost evenly matched. And so in that situation, you have an independent, and each side is going to woo them. Each side is going to say, will you please vote for our legislation? Will you make the difference for our legislation? And that gives you power. That gives you power to cross your arms over your chest and say, not unless you do this for my district, not unless we watch out for the interests of my district. And so that gives me leverage.
And there's another dynamic there, is that they're all under leadership. So if they present a bill that the leadership doesn't like, then they have to look over their shoulder and be afraid that they're going to get their proverbial head chopped off. Whereas you, and we talked about this, can give them cover. So if you actually put forth a bill that said, hey, we want to have reasonable prices at the grocery store, we want to stop price gouging, just as a couple of examples that are really for the people, you can put that forward, and instead of them having to put their name on the top of the bill, maybe they can sign on and they'd be okay. So this is the dynamic on Capitol Hill. It's also the way it is on Beacon Hill too, but that's an unfortunate truth. But having an independent individual in there can actually change that dynamic. That can be helpful.
Yeah, I can provide leadership. So I can step out for the people. It's very interesting that 80% of the population wants this policy and that policy. And usually it's 80% of the representatives want the opposite.
It's unbelievable.
That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
I mean,
so me as a regular person, as a person who has not been a politician, would be my first time in office, even though I have experience on Capitol Hill and I've experience with passing legislation, but it would be my first time in office. And as a person who was looking to influence legislation, I was a civilian. I was just a regular person. So I can actually stand up and say, look, these are the concerns. We need more doctors. We need lower prices. We need jobs in our district. We need to reshore manufacturing to our district. It gives me freedom. It gives me the freedom to stand up. And actually, that's what the founding fathers intended. They intended us to be a regular person, a doctor, a lawyer, a farmer, and to go to Washington for a couple years, bring the needs of the district to Washington for a couple years, and then come home and resume your career or resume your occupation.
People have been talking about term limits for so long, and it's almost like a joke at this point, because term limits, people just assume that'll never happen because the people in office would have to decide to do that. But you're advocating for term limits.
Definitely. And I would model them. So I wouldn't go for more than 6 years. So it would be, if I was able to get elected, I would only be elected, if I could manage it, for 3 2-year terms. But really, the Constitution should be changed so that an elected representative would be there for 4 years, and then it should be a term limit for 2 4-year terms, because that allows someone to get something done. It allows them to learn the ropes and build, some relationships and everything, because it does take a little time to do that. So that would be effective and reasonable, but it's a constitutional amendment. So that's a high bar. So it's not like we can just jump in and have that happen, but I would model it and I would try to push to eventually get them.
And Susan Corcola says the price of butter is ridiculous. I only buy it when it's on sale. Yes, says Susan. Caitlin Pierce says that is exactly what I keep saying about our own mission. And Caitlin is working hard on the PCB issue here in Pittsfield, and certainly advocating strongly. I'm just a regular person like everyone else, and we know Caitlin very well, and she's a great advocate and very involved in the community for sure. So yeah, I mean, regular. Yeah, not a regular person. Nadia's not a regular person. I mean, but you are a mother. You are a citizen, and you see that change needs to be made, and that's why you're doing this.
I am a regular person in that I'm not insulated from problems. So, for example, my daughter was working. She was a worker who got on a plane that was organized by her job, by her boss. So anyone and people should not fly on these MAX planes. They're out there. They have a lot of defects. They have a lot of problems, and you should definitely avoid them. But she didn't know that, so she was a regular person who just, got the ticket.
And that's the
737 MAX. Yeah. And in my case, I had a child who was exposed to carcinogens in the environment, and he got cancer. And then he died from that cancer. So in terms of PCBs, Richard Neal 4 years ago said that the PCBs in Lee should be properly treated and stored properly. But now he thinks that those PCBs should be in a residential area in Lee, next to the river they were taken out of, and next to a state park. So what caused him to change his mind in 4 years? $50,000 contribution from General Electric, so for his campaign over that period of time. So he sold us out for $50,000, and he saved General Electric millions of dollars in transport costs. So they would have to take all that sludge to New York State, to a processing facility, and then take it onto a place to be stored. And so by agreeing to change his mind, he helped them save a ton of money, but he also is exposing our community to carcinogens, the type of carcinogens that has already caused a lot of cancer in our community. And also, I have experienced this personally. Like, having cancer in your family changes everything about your life. You drop all of your activities, you drop everything that you're doing, you just keep going to the hospital, you just keep trying to support that person. You try to get your faith community or any of your other communities to try to help you. I mean, it's a crisis that goes on and on and on for many months. And hopefully the person recovers. In our case, our child did not recover. And I know lots of people who do not recover. So I don't want to perpetuate this. I'm not selling anybody out. I'm not taking any corporate contributions at all.
And I can tell you, and we're just looking at some of your family photos back from the day, and people can check those out on the website as well. But family is important, and you've had your tragedies. No doubt. And I look at that, and contributions mean something. Sometimes you'll be in this political world and people will insinuate that, oh, well, they give to everybody and they take money from everybody. No, it means something when and when someone gives money to somebody, they expect something in return, generally speaking. Again, if it's just a supportive family member, that's one thing. They just are well-wishing, that's one thing. But when it's a corporation and it's powerful entities, there's definitely an expectation of something in return.
There's limits on individual contributions. So people can only contribute, for example, $3,300 maximum to my campaign. But if you're a corporation, you can contribute to a PAC. And because of Citizens United, there's no limit on the contributions that you can make for that. So Richard Neal receives a lot of money from the pharmaceutical industry to a PAC in support of his campaigns. And you can see it in his votes. So in December of 2023, Richard Neal was the only member of the Mass delegation to vote against transparency in pharmaceutical pricing. That means in a practical sense that our insurance rates are going to go up, because when you don't have transparency, when we don't know how much the hospitals are charging or the pharmacies are charging for their pharmaceuticals for medicine, then we don't know like how to regulate these prices. But whereas when it's out in the open, then there's more scrutiny over it, and people are not going crazy with the prices. But he was the only person
over time we've
of
seen
the
these
9 people to
absurd.
vote. He voted against that, and it didn't, it didn't pass. So in other words, he didn't prevail. There is now transparency.
There was some common sense in Washington.
He didn't have it. He didn't have it.
Richard Neal was not a part of that common sense. Right. Yeah. Which is astonishing to me, that why in the world would you not want to have transparency in pharmaceutical prices? And people know, and if there are some pharmaceuticals, there are some drugs that people have had to have over the last several years. Some have just skyrocketed. Yeah. I think diabetes in particular, insulin. It's absurd. It's absurd. And it's pure price gouging.
Yeah, for sure. So if you want to understand my opponent's relationship to the district, just look at the way that he spent his contributions. So all these contributions we're talking about from big companies, how did he spend them? So he really hasn't been campaigning like anybody hasn't seen. I have television ads out there. I've had to pay in the Springfield area $57,000 a month for these television ads. I have radio ads out there. I've only been able to raise and borrow $500,000 for the campaign, but Richard Neal has $4 million for his campaign. So let's look at the things that he listed on the.
By the way, $500,000 seems like a lot.
No, but not if you have to pay.
But that's a hell of a. That's you've done pretty well with what you've got. So congratulations on that. But again, compared to the war chest that Richard Neal has.
I also can't reach everybody in my district to tell them that I'm running with $500,000. So we have 3 media markets in our district. Really, on the very eastern part of the district, it's Boston Media Market. And my portion of that is only 7%. And I can't afford to buy any advertising in the Boston Media Market. So I haven't done that. I've only bought the advertising in the center, which is Springfield. And then I haven't bought also advertising in Albany, because it's the same situation. Berkshire County is a small part of the Albany media market, and I don't have that amount of money to pay. I mean, would it be more than $57,000 in Boston? I don't know what it would be, $100,000 a month. Anyway, I don't have the money. So I just bought it in the center where most of the voters are. But look at how Richard Neal spends this money. $5,495 at a DC restaurant. This is his campaign funds. $11,000 at a resort in California. So he's not even in the district. $4,600 every month to his family member. $9,000 to other campaigns. So if people are, if companies are giving to Richard Neal's campaign, he's actually giving it to other people. $16,000 for limousines. How do you even pay $16,000 for limousines? How could that even happen? That's even more than the resort in California. $2,000 for baseball tickets. $3,500 for a hotel in DC. But he owns $1 million house in DC. So what does he need a hotel there? $4,600 again every month for his family member. So these are just the last couple of months, these kind of expenditures. And he has spent $2.5 million of his campaign contributions like that. And he could have spent it for the benefit of the district. We need forums on fentanyl use and opioid use.
Which, by the way, doesn't cost anything. For Richard Neal to come to Pittsfield and do a forum on fentanyl or housing or greedflation, what have you, there's not a lot of cost to that, overall. So that's just a matter of choosing to do something or not. But yeah.
But you could spend the money in a great way. For example,
absolutely.
You could hire kids from Westfield State University or some of the other schools of higher education here, where you could ask those young people who are interested in political science or sociology or healthcare or mental health care to make these forums happen. And then you could, because Richard Neal is saying that he's campaigning for Kamala. Okay, so he's campaigning for her. So he's busy. So he can't come to the district to campaign. But there's plenty of young people that would love the chance to put this together for their community. And yes, it wouldn't cost it very much money, but he has plenty of money. He could get a nice venue. He could provide food. He could provide
Snacks.
support,
snacks.
support for the community. Yeah, snacks. He could provide, material support for the human beings that are affected by these issues. So yeah, I think that it's really important for us to look at how is he spending his campaign money and to take that as a window into his relationship with the district.
Yeah, and it's not good enough. It's not good enough. And so I know, certainly people, they have a big D next to their name, and often they'll just go and they'll vote party line. But I think, your biggest issue isn't people choosing you. It's making sure they know you're actually on the ballot. And I think once people understand where you stand on issues and your passion behind those issues, then tell me. Well, you can tell me better than I can say, but how has the reaction been to people in communities as you've been campaigning?
When let's say I meet 100 people in a day at the Belchertown Fair, about 5 of them will tell me that they're voting for Richard Neal out of 100. So most people that I meet are really excited. They're surprised that I'm running. He's been unopposed. We have a uniparty in our district. It's only the Democratic Party, and Richard Neal runs unopposed most of the time. So I think that if everybody, well, I know from 2 polls that were done that if everybody knew that I was running, that I would win the election. So that is the challenge. So if you guys are interested in me, just tell the people that you know that I'm running. So they can have a choice, because what's going to happen is many people don't like Richard Neal. So when they go to their ballot, they'll see his name. They don't want to vote for him. Then they see my name and they don't know who I am. So then they just don't vote for the office at all. So if you want to make a difference, all you have to do is tell the people you know who are voters that I am running. And I can actually beat him. I still have a chance to beat him. And it would have to be word of mouth. I've done everything that I can do and continue to do. Like I've bought television ads through November 5th, radio ads. I'm doing Spanish radio ads. I'm, doing mailers. I'm doing everything that I can think of. But the thing that's going to make the difference is the word of mouth campaign. Because when people hear from their friends, then they pay attention. They just get bombarded too much by all kinds of other media.
And I know some people in the radio industry, and they've heard your ads, and they really like them.
Yeah, I tried to make them funny. Yeah,
they are very, very good.
I love the mailer. This is fantastic, and my favorite part is at the top: not left, not right. And that I'm independent. I've always been independent, so that struck a chord with me.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks for all the supportive comments that people are making online. It really, it's very heartening to hear your support. Thank you.
I think more than ever, clearly we have a hot presidential race at the top of the ticket, but I just overall feel like people are just sick and tired of the ultra, just extreme one way or the other, and lack of common sense, because we just get so caught up in the diatribes and the vitriol and forget what's happening every day. And like, I have not heard a lot about the cost of groceries in this presidential campaign. I have not heard a lot about Social Security benefits, the things that are really impacting people each and every day.
Everybody.
And
it impacts everyone.
You hear a lot about a lot of other things, for sure. And all that gets hyped up. And this is nothing new. This has been going on, in national politics and in the media for a long, long time. But and when Nadia, and when you get the opportunity to be on national media, typically it's for air safety, and that has been the case. And you've had those opportunities, which has been good for your exposure, but it's really been on that one issue. But I think, my God, wouldn't it be great and refreshing to actually talk about the issues impacting people each and every day, including PZBs, including the cost of groceries, including the quality of education, that sort of thing.
Well, I think what Kara was saying, not left, not right. I mean, it could also say practical.
Yeah.
Like we're just concerned, all the issues on my card, not enough doctors, manufacturing jobs moving back into our district. Like Richard Neal has voted for China to have most favored nation status and to be part of the World Trade Organization. What was the result of that? They just went crazy producing all the products we buy. So we need to produce those products here, especially in our district. We need to produce medical products, medicines like generic pharmaceuticals that are produced in China and India and that have a lot of adulterated components in them.
Right.
So they hurt people's livers, people who are already sick and looking for pain relief. So those kind of things are just practical. How can we have national healthcare or like universal healthcare and making sure everyone is covered if we don't have enough doctors?
Right.
We have to start on the ground from the components of that everyone has to have in order to have care with the insurance that they already pay for. So I think food security in our district, we produce more food than any other district in Massachusetts. We also have the highest number of SNAP benefits of any other district.
I think people would be surprised by that because when we go to the grocery store, generally, most of us will go to one of the typical grocery stores, the Big Y or Market 32 or Stop and Shop. I think that there's so many benefits from truly, and talk about a great way to invest. If you were able to scale local food in a way that, like you said, we already produce quite a bit, so it's benefiting our community, that would be a congressperson's what a great achievement that would be.
I mean, it's really interesting. There's a lot of African immigrants that have just been placed in Springfield. They didn't choose to go there. They're farmers from Africa. They're refugees from war areas. And some of them came to my farm and they saw all the field corn that we feed cows. And they were like, this isn't cow feed. We eat this food. And so they started picking corn and they bake it and they use it in various ways. So those human beings are in food deserts in Springfield, but they still have the desire for fresh food and fresh vegetables. And they still have the knowledge about how do you grow it yourself and how do you fix it? How do you cook it? So they can be great leaders in this whole effort to get people to eat healthier, right? And get rid of some of our problems like diabetes that come from eating too many sweets and processed foods.
Yeah. And there are co-ops, but you don't hear much about them, which is unfortunate,
And it's a certain segment, I think. I think, people maybe, I could be wrong, but generally, kind of a wealthier group of people go to co-ops and that sort of thing. And it doesn't go across all the entire spectrum as far as that goes. That's my opinion. I may not be correct, but it sure seems that way.
Well, you can, go to Aldi's or you can access fresh food. You just have to know how to cook it and how to choose your food in a way which is inexpensive and tasty, right? And so people who have lived in food deserts for 30 years, they've lost their gut has changed. Their taste buds have changed to prefer maybe like potato chips and the things that are available to them. And, their bodies are suffering as a result. So anyway, this is all tackleable. We can improve the basic quality of life in our district. It has gone down in 34 years that Richard Neal has been in office. The quality of life for people in Congressional District 1 has declined. And we need to stand up and do something about it. I don't want to stay there forever. This is not my career. I just want to make a better standard for representation.
Yeah, and speaking of that property down in Sheffield, a little lighthearted moment now. So
it's beautiful.
It's beautiful, and so there's
four-wheeler,
and so there's Nadia on the the ladder, and I got to tell you, there's the treehouse right there. And it from that picture that it doesn't give justice how scary that ladder is when you get up that ladder. Now it's no big deal for Nadia; she just goes bounding up it, no big deal. But I was scared. Yeah. I was very scared. But it was a lot of fun.
Really well,
I hung in there.
And
you were fine.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm not really afraid of heights or anything like that.
Yeah, you were fine with it, but like so it is high up there, that treehouse. And then so there you are with your husband there at the top. And so, do you guys just hang out there all the time?
Yeah, I mean, my husband
Not all the
works
time.
there.
Obviously, you're running for
Yeah, he
Congress,
works
but
there. He made like he made a little roof there and he goes up there and does his actual office work there. But yeah, I live in an amazing place. Berkshire County is so beautiful. Where we live is lovely. And my husband and my two sons made that treehouse during COVID when we were thinking a lot about our daughter who we had just lost to the plane crash. So it was a healing experience. I have a son who's a sailing boat captain and he knows how to climb masts. So he climbed up there with all the materials and put the basic structure together. Yeah, so we do a lot of hands-on work on our farm and we do a lot of fun things too.
and it's a little ways to get up to the treehouse, and it's a bit of a hike. It's a bit of a hike. But the one thing that I noticed very clearly was that Nadia went bounding up there with no shoes on.
Yeah.
None. Not at all. I mean, this is now this is someone you want as your congressperson. That's what
I am a hardy person. I mean, I think if you look at the New York Times article, you'll see a link and it
it
shows
wasn't all
me
soft grass on the way up there, by the way. There were stones, there were brooks, there was,
Stumps.
stumps, there was brush.
Hike them.
yeah, it's pretty. And at first, after my daughter died, I felt like I was floating in the air. This is a common feeling in grief where you just feel that the world is unreal because you lost your person. So the world, it doesn't seem like it's real. You feel it kind of like you're floating. So for a while, I just didn't wear shoes, even in the winter, to try to feel the reality of the earth. And yeah, but I think that I also do some swimming in freezing water. I swim in the Houstonic River. I swim there even when it's got ice on it. And so if you go to the New York Times article about me, there is, and maybe John can post, there's a link that has a gift. So even if you don't have a subscription to the Times, you can still get in with this link. And it has a place you can push and go to YouTube and you can see me swimming in ice water. So I think I just kind of take life as it comes and I am hardy. And in the video, you can see that I fall on the ice and then I get up again and then I try to move the ice out of my way. So I think it is a real aspect of my character that I just keep going. For example, this running for Congress, this is a really big deal. John met me at a time where I didn't know anything about politics. I didn't know how to run. And I got a lot of advice from him about what I should consider. And I was just totally lost. Like, how do you begin such a thing? How do you file with FEC? How do you put a gift donation mechanism in place? I mean, John has like advised me and thought about and watched me struggle with all this. And, it's just step by step by step. And somehow we keep moving to the next step. And so that's how I consider the campaign. So I have a chance to win. And I hope that if people share with their friends that I will win. But let's say I do win, then I'm still going to run again in 2 years. So even if I win, I'm going to run again in 2 years. And if I don't win, I'm going to run again in 2 years.
Right.
So I'm still going to keep building. This is a long-term project. It's not a career project. It's not a forever project, but it's a long-term project where I'm getting to know the district, the needs of the district, standing up for people in the press, using my public persona and platform to highlight issues that that affect people and that they're suffering. There's a lot of suffering in our district. And what we're doing, sending $8.7 billion abroad when we don't have the $9 billion to cover the needs of the flood victims, in North Carolina, that's insanity.
Yeah.
We are spending money in ways that we can't afford. We have a lot of suffering in our country that we have to attend to, and we have to pay to help people. That's our tax money, our tax money. So our tax money should be used primarily for our well-being and our society. So I am going to stand up for that no matter what happens in the future.
And I did post the New York Times article in the comments section. What an amazing article. I just want to
really was an amazing article.
I just want to take a moment there because who would have Well, I mean, I guess it could have been predicted, but early on, when those early days, I don't know, December, January, whenever it was, when you were first considering running and deciding to run, and then to realize that you would have not, this is not just a brief in the New York Times. I mean, this is an
3-page
it's a
spread.
3-page spread. I mean, this is an article that people dream about, and well, the reason why they wrote it was because of your story, and your story is amazing. But could you ever imagine that, and how powerful that is, for the campaign and for the cause?
And I actually don't want to have an article like that about me because it exposes details about my family and about my existence that and my messy hair and
It
everything
was
like
raw.
that. Yeah,
It was no
that you
bullshit.
don't necessarily want
Yeah.
exposed. And I did it because me as independent candidate with a limited budget, I couldn't possibly get that kind of publicity. And a lot of support came in from readers, financial support for the campaign. Not the same kind of support Richard Neal has, but enough to power the campaign forward. And so that's why I did it. So yeah, it's a trade-off. It's not necessarily comfortable to have details about my husband's relationship and struggles we've had and everything exposed to the public. But how else are you supposed to connect with the electorate? And how else can you get to know the voters and have them get to know you? I've had a lot of dialogue with people who have contacted the campaign after that and asked me questions and been concerned and had issues. Well, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I answer all of them. So I'm upfront. On my website, you'll see limited issues. And those are the issues that I can actually affect. Those are the issues that I have a pathway to make change for. But I might be called to vote on other issues. And so if people have direct questions about those, I'm happy to answer them.
And what I would say, yeah, and it is, I know it can be difficult, and uncomfortable, but you are authentic,
Mm-hmm.
you are real, you are true. And I think when it comes down to it, that article, even I know it's uncomfortable, but it is you. And I think that's one thing, no matter how this election goes, you may give him a good run and it may be close, or maybe he wins by a landslide, or maybe you eke it out. Whatever it is, you're true and you are authentic. And I've known you during this time, and other people have worked on your campaign and known you now during this time, and your family. And that's and at the end of the day, that is the authenticity, and being real and being true and being you is, it's more important than anything.
Thank you, John. I have discovered an interesting superpower, which I didn't know that I had, but I see God's work and how God created each human being and every single human being that I interact with. And so when I go into someone's office, I'm talking to them about aviation safety or about Social Security or about, the fact that people need their Social Security benefits in addition to their municipal pension, whatever it is that I'm talking to them about the need for doctors, I'm looking into their humanity and I'm looking into our common existence and how we're both made in a way to serve our communities. And I can touch that. I can reach that in each human being. And so it makes me able to work in a bipartisan way. It makes me able to work with every single person who's in Congress. And it has an amazing result. I never knew that I had this superpower before I tried to do this work, but I discovered it, and now I want to use it for the best benefit of my district.
And God knows we need more of that.
Yes.
So,
That's an amazing
so
story.
Nadia, what a great pleasure having you on the program for the first time, and known you for some time, and being able to share your story with our viewership, and here with Cara. It has been wonderful tonight. So we'll post this here on Facebook. It'll be on YouTube and other platforms as well. But I wish you the very best, and we'll be seeing you.
We're excited.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys very much. Wonderful to get to know you.
Yes, same.